Welcome to Modern Farm Business Podcast. This podcast is designed to help the farm leader bring their business to the next level. We'll cover everything from leadership and finance to strategy and planning. I'm your host, Dean Hefta. The behaviors of great business leaders really begins with their thinking and their values and how they navigate through economic changes and trends. To share his insights on the farm leader and the business of farming is Dr. David Kohl, Professor Emeritus of Agriculture and Applied Economics at Virginia Tech. He's devoted his life to bringing dynamic instruction and great research to the field of agricultural finance and management. In his career, he's educated more than 10,000 students, received 11 major teaching awards. He's traveled over 9 million miles and conducted more than 6,000 workshops and seminars, teaching financial and business-related topics. He's passionate about helping farmers improve their business, but I also appreciate the fact that he gets his business hands dirty as part owner of Homestead Creamery, a value-added dairy business in the Blue Ridge Mountains. Dr. Kohl, welcome to the program.
It's great to be with you, Dean, and I look forward to the engagement here.
It's always fun to get your insights. You see so many different aspects of the world of farming and the business of agriculture. And let's get into it. I mean, when you think about the stuff that's rattling around in the most successful farm business minds, what is it that you see that makes them different from the rest?
I think what makes them very, very successful is strategic alignment. 95% of businesses that are successful know how to garner resources. They know how to apply talent, either their talent or people who surround them. And then they're constantly aware of changes in the marketplace so that they can capitalize on opportunity. So in a nutshell, strategic alignment is one of the major components. Within that, though, they're a little bit better in many areas of the business, whether it's production, whether it's marketing, whether it's finance, or being able to put a business culture together. What they are always looking at is how they can become incrementally better compared to other producers who may be looking for a magic silver bullet. That incremental improvement is a standard I see as I work with producers not only here in North America, but around the world. And the other element is they assemble either an informal or formal advisory team. It could be the crop consultant, the livestock consultant. It could be the financial person or the marketing person. They fill in the cavities or the gaps that, they may lack the talent, but they also use that advisory team to make them critically think, try to get them to the next level. Those are some of the things that the peak performers are astute at.
That concept of strategic alignment is interesting, and the two pieces there of resources and talents. When you think about talents, what are some of the things that stand out of, if you're going to have a thriving farm business, here's a handful of talents that either you need to possess yourself or you need to have people on your team or in your network that are bringing those. Do you see some things that are gaps or that are really critical as you define a talent?
Oftentimes, as they do their assessment, they know there are areas where they might have some deficiencies, and then they kind of bring in people that complement them. For example, if they're strong in production, then they will have someone usually that will fill the gap in finance. But they just don't completely turn that role over to that individual. They are there to work side by side. The other thing, too, Dean, they're always thinking about building bench strength. That is, if something happens to one individual, who can kind of come in and fill that gap? Or if something happens to the CEO or the owner of the business, kind of where are they going to be going there? So those are some of the things they do to take that business to the next level.
Now, you've seen maybe former students or people that you've known for many years in agriculture progress in their business leadership. From your observation, how much of these innate things that I might be born with or maybe I was exposed to growing up around a business is learnable and I can apply regardless of, some of the things that I was naturally born with or raised around? How much of that is learnable from what you've seen?
Of course, I've worked with some of the larger farm businesses where there are some really, really strong leaders. And when you do the DISC personality assessment, many of my leaders will have the D characteristic. They'll have the dominant characteristic. What makes that leader special? They know how to complement their leadership with other types of personality styles. For example, the D will have the high C, or the detailed person that kind of keeps them out of the ditch, kind of keeps them in the road. Sometimes they'll have the stable S personality, and then sometimes a quieter D will have the I, or the more outgoing, sales-oriented type of personality. The other thing, and I heard this with Peyton Manning the other day on a leadership cast, he says good leaders have to be coachable. And one of the things I find, the good leader, they're always passionate and try to be in a learning type of mode. And it's that attitude that can help overcome some of the aptitude type of deficiencies. But sometimes leadership is built out of what I call compounding. In other words, life's experiences. Sometimes that quiet individual in a tough situation will step up to the plate and make a big impact. And so oftentimes I find leadership can be a compounding of experiences over a lifetime. So I think it's a combination. Some of it's inherited, some of it is life experiences and education, but never forget the compounding effect over a number of years.
That's really insightful, that coachability. And I was in a meeting a few days ago with a venture capitalist, and he was talking about some of the things that he's seeing in the most successful businesses over time and how they're thinking about things differently. They don't think about time in the normal way. They think about it in terms of how fast can we learn something new. So these iterations, and that seems to fit into what you're talking about with this learning from the experiences. How many and how fast can I have some new experiences so I can learn new things and get better through? Would you say that you see that at play?
Yeah, absolutely. And the venture capitalist is spot on here. A real good leader knows how to kind of connect the dots. It might be a change in the marketplace. It might be spotting a certain person. Up in Canada about 15 years ago, one of the leaders up there in the banking industry, he saw one of my former students, and he says, "You want a job?" And the individual says, "Yeah, maybe." And I asked the individual, "What did you see?" And he says he had a sparkle in his eye. And he says, "I could just tell he had that innate type of ability." And that was a classic example. Boy, he operated right off gut instinct. And by the way, that person is with that large bank in Canada and very high up in the organization. And so sometimes you do connect the dots on the fly. Sometimes you'll make mistakes, and that's one of the things. Leaders will make mistakes. But boy, one thing I learned at basketball camp with Bob Knight is you could make a mistake, but boy, you didn't make the same mistake twice, or you had a 6'5" gentleman right in your face. and so it's real critical that you be able to connect the dots and move very, very quickly.
You know, earlier you mentioned how important resources are in that strategic alignment. And in farming, we know that really acutely when you think about land. And as farm leaders, it can be tempting to, look at other farms that are successful and say, oh, well, they had a great head start with a lot of owned land, and anybody could be successful with that kind of head start. What advice do you have for a farm that just doesn't have that type of advantage, and how do they compete?
One of the things, Dean, that I'm having a number of individuals do in my seminars is define what is success. what is success when you own a lot of land versus where you're controlling assets is probably going to be a little bit different. And Dean, we are definitely seeing a shift away from land ownership. Right around World War II, approximately 15% of the land was rented and leased. Today, it's over 50%. You can be very, very successful, not necessarily with the ownership of assets, but control of assets. But what differentiates you is this concept called intellectual capital. And I want you to mark that one down. And what is intellectual capital? They used to say a barrier to entry was financial capital. That's still true, but I really feel a barrier of entry and continuity and sustainability is intellectual capital. And that's basically the ability to be able to differentiate yourself and gain the competitive edge by planning, strategizing, executing, and monitoring. Oftentimes, people who have a large amount of equity in land, they get complacent. They forget the basics. And so where the person that's renting and leasing, and oftentimes this is the younger producer, they've got to be a little bit better in the ability to plan and execute a marketing plan to give them the differential advantage. They've got to be astute negotiators if they're renting and leasing land. And then it goes back to my first point. They got to know that alignment. That alignment is consistent with their talents, their core values, and kind of the vision of where they want to go. And so those are some of the ways that I see a person can be successful without inheriting the silver spoon or marrying into it.
Yeah, that's a great perspective to have. And I love the question, stopping and saying, what's success? And success isn't what your neighbor thinks is successful or what success looks like when you read the farm magazine. It's how you define it. One of my favorite definitions of success is really achieving that you have identified as valuable. And that can be very different for very different people, and making sure that we're clear on what's valuable for us that we're pursuing. Let's zoom out a little bit here into the kind of bigger picture. Are there some economic trends that are over time going to continue to press on the farm leader that they need to be prepared for?
Yeah, and of course you've heard me speak over the years. I often talk about how we have increase in volatility, whether it's markets, whether it's cost, with all the given, trade aspects that wasn't even on a radar screen 2 years ago, now are on our radar screens. But the key for my leaders is to be able to manage volatility in a smaller margin environment. You take that period of 2003 to 2012, people made more money in that period than they did the previous 36 years. Now we're going to go back to that period. And I don't want to be gloom and doom. We're going back to a smaller margin, so the chance of error, you've got to lessen it. And managing that volatility in a narrow margin environment is going to be a key to success. The other one, I'm finally going to be right, Dean. I've been going around speaking to groups for 10 years saying interest rates are going to increase. Well, I'm finally going to be right. And I think the next change is that we've got to manage in an interest rate increasing environment with smaller margins. And so a 50 basis point or 0.5% increase, it's going to feel a lot higher because we are playing in a smaller margin environment. But the other thing is we've become so accustomed to low and flat interest rates, it's going to be kind of an emotional shock. And so doing that sensitivity analysis is going to be very, very important. I think the other one, Dean, the past 30 or 40, 50 years, technology has really driven the business model, and you can see it. But one of the things that I really see, it's going to be technology aligned with the consumer marketplace. And again, you're saying, commodities, you're talking the value add. Yeah, I am. But all you got to do is look at what's happened to the beer market. over the past 4 or 5 years with all the craft beers. It's taking a commodity-driven business and driven it into what I call a splintered marketplace. What I'm trying to get across here is, yeah, there's still going to be a place for commodities, but you're going to be the low-cost producer, and you've got to have a drive toward efficiency. But there's also going to be these niche markets that pop up, and technology is going to be either an enhancer or a disruptor, or it's not going to be used. And these mega trends of the consumer marketplace that's happening in Europe, it's happening in Australia and New Zealand, they're coming to the United States, and it'll even take some commodity markets and turn it upside down. So, hey, I've rambled on there, Dean, but those are 3 areas that I really am keeping my eye on the radar screen in the macro market.
That's excellent. So let's bring it home here. I'm a farmer, and I really want to raise my business game here. What's something I should be doing or learning this year that I should focus on?
Here's what I would do. And again, I am a business person, and so I will tell you, take an area, whether it's finance, marketing, people, strategic, risk management, or business planning, and take a deep dive in one of those areas. And if you are a family business or you have multiple partners, both of the partners take a deep dive. And for example, in finance, I just took about 32 producers through a financial literacy program over a 4-month period. And it was just amazing, Dean. At first, I went into goal setting. They basically said I spent too much time on the soft skill initially. But then when it was all said and done, they go, that was a pretty powerful type of exercise. And what I'm trying to say is sometimes it's just not a one-day seminar. Sometimes it's a course over a period of time. Sometimes it's a school like TPAP or, some of the young farmer educational programs that are sponsored. They are very, very critical for taking things from the back of the mind, putting them up on the front burner, but also learning new concepts and principles. So I would, just to summarize, I would say take a deep dive in one of those areas, and don't be afraid to take a deep dive outside of agriculture. For example, we just took our staff through the Chick-fil-A experience at Homestead Creamery, some of our staff. And again, it gets them thinking outside their normal business role. So that would be one, just raising your game plan to the next level. That's something that you could do. Even myself, one of the things that I like to do is sometimes attend basketball clinics or basketball camp. Sometimes it just makes me kind of think, what are you all doing that I can take back into the agriculture industry? It just kind of keeps you, motivated and kind of keeps you going.
Great advice. Joining me today has been Dr. David Kohl. You can find more of the stuff that he's writing about in his Road Warrior column in Corn and Soybean Digest, and you see him speaking in lots of different engagements throughout the country, throughout the year. So, David, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, boy, it's been a pleasure, and you all keep up the good work, and thank you very much for having me on the podcast.
Thanks.